Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today to learn about accessibility at the University of Waterloo. Whether you are you have a known or unknown disability or condition or illness, or if you're experiencing a past trauma, accessibility services is here to help. Accessibility can help you develop your individualized academic accommodation plan for all components of your academic career. Today's session on accessibility services will be presented by Zina Bartolata is a registered social worker who has worked with accessibility services for 8 years. So for those who are tuning in online who weren't able to hear that beginning, this session is about accessibility services, which is for everyone, whether you have an unknown disability, condition, illness, or if you're experiencing impacts from trauma, here to help develop your individualized academic accommodation plan for all components of your academic career. Zina Bartolata is a registered social worker who has worked with accessibility services for 8 years. The prior 22 years were primarily been in healthcare and pediatrics. Zina started with accessibility services as a clinical records evaluator and accommodation lead, and is now one of 2 managers of academic accommodations. Zina is part of a team of 9 accommodation consultants and works closely with academic units, professors, and students on accommodation planning. We'll give a warm welcome to Zina.
I just want to start with that I am maybe a 60-ish-year-old woman wearing black slacks and a top that is blue, green with white and black, and a gray sweater. I have dark brown hair. I'm wearing white glasses, and I'm happy to be here and hope that I can answer any of your questions and give you some information. As I believe at Accessibility Services, we have an important role to play here at the University of Waterloo. And I want to let you know that I do not give presentations very often. So if I stumble, please have patience with me. And I do have tremors, so you will see my hands tremoring. That's just part of my own disability conditions. I like to start with the territorial acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral and Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. My home and our main campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations in 1793 that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which the University of Waterloo campuses are located that precede the establishment of the university. With acknowledgement comes the need to act. Within AAS, Accessibility Services, we are conscious and supportive of the University of Waterloo's Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism's mandate. Our goal is to ensure our work is meaningfully anti-racist by design, and Black, Indigenous, and other racialized students and staff are actively engaged as integral contributors to the unit and to our work. The university's active work towards reconciliation takes place across our campuses through research, learning, teaching, and community building, and is centralized within our Indigenous Initiative Office. Well, the agenda for our nice little meeting here today is just give you a little, I'll give you a little bit of background about Accessibility Services, who we support, what we do, and how to apply for academic accommodations, the registration process, and to understand that. Additional resources and contact information will be at the end of the slides. And I think we're going to take questions also at the end. So the background. So the Ontario Human Rights Code, we just refer to it as the code, is the law that provides for equal rights and opportunities and freedom from discrimination. Disability is one of the 8 grounds protected by the code, and disability is defined very broadly, and is intended to be expansive, flexible, and encompassing of new, emerging, and inconclusive conditions and disabilities. Accessibility Services is the university's centralized office for the engagement of student and academic accommodations. We are led by the university's legal mandate to accommodate and support equitable access to post-secondary education. Our primary role is to design student academic accommodation guidelines. Student academic accommodation guidelines. We ensure access and participation in a student's education, and we remove barriers, and our goal is to help build capacity. And we increase awareness of the impact of disability on student experience, and we collaborate very closely with the university's administrators, faculty, and staff. Here we go. Who we support. We support any student. We're going to support a full-time student. We're going to support a part-time student, undergraduate students, graduate students, PhD students, students on their academic and co-op terms, students on placement terms, domestic and especially international students also. Students impacted in their ability to access and meaningfully participate in their education related to disability. So we help students with known, and here at the University of Waterloo, we will also assist students who suspect they may have a disability that is impacting their ability to engage with academics. Not all universities do that. We are pretty unique with that. What we have come to learn, because we have been doing that for quite a few years now, is that once a student registers with us as having possibly a suspected disability, maybe they think they have ADHD, but they were never tested for ADHD. What we find is the majority of those students do register with us with a disability because we work with them to ensure that they have access to healthcare, access to testing, to ensure that they see if they are eligible and they do have a diagnosis. So I think suspected disabilities is important for us and the students that we support. We work with students who experience permanent, temporary, sporadic, and episodic conditions. So when we talk about who we support, so we support students who may have physical disabilities. I think often individuals think that accessibility offices and post-secondary support primarily students with physical disabilities, mobility impairments, broken arms, seizures, arthritis, cancer. The reality is the majority of the students that we do support, I would say 75, 80% are being supported because of mental health conditions. And so they could have sensory issues, visual impairment, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing. Mental health is the primary. There's anxiety, tremendous amount of students who register with us related to anxiety, depression. It can be temporary. Right? It could be a student having a difficult time adjusting to being away from home, right? So that adjustment period may be difficult. So that would be someone who could register with us. What we are also unique in how we support students at the University of Waterloo is we do support students who have experienced trauma. So trauma can be geographical violence. It could be war. Students who have been impacted by the violence in Israel and Palestine and Ukraine. Those are students who still have impacts upon their ability to engage with academics, especially what we find is when there's a lot of news, there's a lot of information coming to students from these regions. It is very hard for them to engage with their academics. We will put together an accommodation plan that will address that trauma. We address racialized oppression here on campus, cultural, intergenerational, absolutely, trauma and historic trauma. Individuals who have witnessed or experienced physical, emotional, or sexual trauma. We work very closely with our sexual violence prevention folks, and they will refer students to us when and if a student feels that they may require accommodations if they have experienced a traumatic event. Also, if a student has experienced a sudden and sometimes a violent loss of a loved one, we are definitely involved and can help get that student through a few terms of their education. What we do as accommodation consultants at Accessibility Services, sorry. What we do. It is our responsibility to determine the eligibility for student academic accommodations. We design student academic accommodation plans. We are not necessarily the individuals or parties that are responsible to ensure that the accommodation plans are followed through with. That is the responsibility of the professors. So that's why we have to work very closely with the academic units, because we simply design accommodation plans. We have the expertise to do that, but then the plans are sent to the professors, and it is the professors' responsibilities and the academic unit's responsibility to uphold those accommodation plans. We coordinate direct referrals. We will get direct referrals, as I said, from Sexual Violence Prevention and Response Office, athletics. If any of your students are going to be an athlete, we definitely help with concussions happen regularly, I would have to say, broken arms, broken legs. We do have to provide accommodations for that. Counseling services, we get plenty of referrals from counseling services for students who don't even know that they would have the ability to have accommodations when they're experiencing some emotional distress. We work with the Human Rights, Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism Office, and we have really good partnerships with the housing for the students who are housed on campus when they experience some difficulties with accessing and experiencing barriers with their education. We also have our primary responsibility in helping students who are registered with their province's student, it's OSAP here, Student Financial Services. We help those students who are registered as students with a prolonged and or a permanent disability to access the bursary program. It does require an accommodation consultant to assess what a student is eligible for. There are things through the bursary for students with disabilities and the Canada Student Grant Program. There are bursaries for things like tutoring. There are bursaries for equipment. Perhaps a student needs a laptop, perhaps they need a printer. One thing that we recommend highly for many of our students who have a lot of sensory input difficulties are noise canceling headphones. So we can look at bursaries for those things. Sometimes, depending upon the type of financial services that a student has, we can also apply for things like an ADHD coach or an academic strategist, which I really recommend for many students who enter post-secondary. It is a transition. It is difficult to get used to having to manage your own schedule, your own academics. So looking at those type of bursaries is really important also. We have many services at Accessibility Services. We are mandated by the government to provide, I'm obviously not the best at this. Here we go. What are our accommodations? Accommodations at post-secondary, it looks different than accommodations that happen in high school. One, we help with extensions on assignments. Certainly, we have students who experience barriers in meeting due dates, so we can help with extensions on assignments. We can assess for accommodations for presentations or group work. We consider note-taking support a service, not an accommodation, because it is a volunteer service here at the University of Waterloo. That being said, students who are registered as having a permanent and or a prolonged and persistent disability with OSAP, they would be eligible possibly for note-taking services, bursaries. We do provide alternative format for students. Some students require text to voice, in which case they would need textbooks in PDF format so that they can use technology for that. We can do reserved seating for students who may need to sit closer and or sit farther back. We're able to help with that. Testing is probably the biggest accommodation that we offer. Our testing is usually extra time. It can be breaks, the use of assistive technology, and noise canceling headphones. Other examples of accommodations, one, we do graduate milestones. So for students who are graduate students, we will work on research milestones, writing thesis milestones, defense milestones, comprehensive exams. We work with integrated learning. So those students who go on co-op, we are happy to do an assessment and provide a letter that you would decide if you want to provide to your co-op employer or not. We definitely work with students who may have professional practicums, like social work students. We will work with them and we will actually provide accommodation planning for those students. We do safety-based accommodations. We have lots of reasons why a student may be in a lab. Perhaps they have visual difficulties, and we would have to provide accommodations to ensure that the student is safe and everyone in the lab is safe. Now here we are about everything that we do at our unit. We are mandated to have learning strategy support. And so we do have, at this point in time, we have 3 individuals who work in our learning strategy section. They do assessments, they provide workshops, which is a great way of learning. And also they do provide sometimes one-to-one assessment, one-to-one assistance for individuals who are struggling greatly, and or we do like to refer students into learning strategy if they have a new diagnosis, right? So we do have students who have a new diagnosis of ADHD. We highly recommend that if a student has a new diagnosis, that they do meet with our learning strategists, just so that they can understand the best way in which they learn and they can understand the tools that we might be able to provide. We do provide assistive technology assessments and demonstrations. We have an adaptive technology equipment loan program, which is fantastic. So if you don't have access to a bursary, perhaps you can borrow some technology before you commit to purchasing that, because it could be a big purchase for a family. We do have strong student drop-in center, and one thing, if anyone can get access to this presentation, we have our course on Learn. So we have an accessibility services course. It is on our Learn platform that is used for all classes here at Waterloo. And the course is something that you can self-register for. Any student can self-register for this course. You do not have to be registered with accessibility services. And on this course, there are a tremendous amount of videos, modules, recommendations for technology that you could possibly even try for a month. Just a really good resource for all students, and I really recommend any and every student. Recommend prof sign up for it. We recommend academic advisors sign up for it because there's a huge amount of resources there. So applying for academic accommodations. We encourage all students with disabilities and or suspected disabilities or someone who has experienced trauma, right, to contact accessibility services when considering applying at Waterloo. We do often have students and or parents who will email us even prior to even accepting coming to the University of Waterloo to understand what services are available right here at Accessibility Services. As I think it is a really important thing. If your student, if your loved one has had an IEP related to disability-based reasons, they should be registering with Accessibility Services. They can register with a copy of their IEP. So it's not even hard to get in, but we would encourage that registration. There is a significant difference between high school and university accommodations. And I think that is probably for individuals, for students, any of you who've had an IEP, that is likely the biggest transition, I feel, coming into university. One, accessibility services in the post-secondary, it is our obligation to address the barriers, right? So we are to reduce barriers. We're not to ensure success. And that can be sometimes a difficult thing. And that may mean a student could have a difficult term or two, right? Until they get used to just how to manage their accommodations and how to manage their academics. But there is a tremendous amount of support at the University of Waterloo for any student as they enter. And I would encourage any student to develop that relationship with an accommodation consultant to help them get through that transition from post-secondary, from high school into post-secondary. There is a link to our facts section about the application and admission process, registration with AAS, and even accommodations with housing. Once students have accepted an offer of admission, then they are able to register with Accessibility Services and submit the required documentation. It only happens after they accept the offer for admission. It's because you do need to have your WAD-IM identification to sign up for our particular portal. Okay. The first step is just complete our application. It's an online application. It really, honestly, it takes 5 to 10 minutes. It's not onerous. It's not difficult to do. You would, if you have an IEP, submit your IEP. If you can, we do have documentation, our disability verification forms on our website. You can take that. In the summer before you enter school, I would recommend getting that form completed by your medical professional, right? If you don't have a doctor, but maybe you work with a nurse practitioner or you have a counselor, right? You work with a social worker, you have a therapist. They can complete one of the forms. It's called a functional limitation verification form. We try to make it as easy as possible for students to register with us. If you have no documentation, that's okay, right? That's okay. What I would recommend is that you apply using our self-assessment. Just do the self-assessment. There's a link to it on our page where the application is. Do the self-assessment. It gets you in the door, right? Let's just get you in the door, and it gives you at least basic accommodations to get you started. And then you can meet with an accommodation consultant that can help direct you towards where perhaps you can get some documentation. Probably one of the most important things I could recommend to anyone who registers with Accessibility Services is please monitor your email account. So we will only communicate with students through their Waterloo email account. Once the student registers with us, that registration application needs to be reviewed by our clinical record team. Once that clinical record specialist reviews the team, they create an accommodation plan that a student can have immediate access to, right? So they can have immediate access to that plan, but they have to call our office, and it is in an email explaining that they must call our office and make a registration appointment in order to get access to that plan. One, we like documentation. It helps us. It's really helpful to have documentation. Legally, we have to have documentation. For us, a lived experience of the student is far more important than documentation. I'd rather hear from a student what has worked for them in the past, what accommodations have worked in high school. What is it that they experience in the classroom setting that makes it difficult to take notes? Why is it difficult to turn in an assignment on time? Why is the testing environment hard and difficult, and what can we do to create that accommodation plan? So for us, the registration appointment is very important. And so we would really like students to attend the registration appointment, which is why we kind of say, make the registration appointment, then you can have access to your accommodation plan. Once you have access to your accommodation plan, you get to activate it. You here at University of Waterloo, Laurier, Guelph, maybe a few other universities, students have the ability to activate their own accommodations every term for each class. So they can determine what accommodation they want for each class, and then they can activate it. So once you get that email from from Accessibility Services, I just recommend highly just read emails from AccessAbility. In the term, we send out emails. We send students reminders. Please register your test to take them in our exam center. You need to do it by a certain time frame. We send out all kinds of reminders, and our experience is that students get really busy, and perhaps Access at Waterloo emails are not necessarily the emails that they want to read. And so I would encourage reading those emails. Lastly, meet with your accommodation consultant as you need to. Absolutely. Your input, your lived experience is very important. We need to hear that lived experience, and we will take it into consideration when we're creating an accommodation plan. Also, our accommodation consultants are the ones that can show you kind of just the ropes of some technology, right? Of our course on Learn, on how to manage your accommodations yourself. So it's really important to, if you can, develop that relationship with your accommodation consultant. Resources. I think I'm coming to the end. Additional resources. With this presentation, with the slide, there is an actual link to our online application. All right, so it's there, it's easily found. One thing that we cover with students, and I'm going to be honest with you, we cover with students, we cover with faculty, we cover with our staff. It's the UWaterloo Student Academic Accommodation Guidelines. Those guidelines are extremely important. It tells us who is responsible for what. It says accessibility services. We have to assess students' needs. We have to listen to their lived experience and create accommodation plans. Students, what their responsibility, they need to engage in the accommodation process, because it's a student who has to activate their accommodations, right? The student needs to register their test to take it in the exam center if they want accommodations. And the student, most importantly, the student must reach out to accessibility services to their accommodation consultant if they're experiencing difficulties that are not being met by their accommodation plan. And we feel like perhaps there may be something missing. Perhaps a student needs more time for testing. Perhaps a student needs more help with assignments that are not being turned in. Maybe they need to meet with a learning strategist. Accommodation consultants have a very high caseload here at the University of Waterloo. We are not able to keep track of students. We depend on students reaching out to us to say, something's not working. Can you please help? Something's not working. And with consent, right? With consent from your student, parents can reach out. Sure. We do aim towards independence. So we want the students to be able to reach out. We do know that there is a learning curve to that. And it may take at least a term, right, for a student to learn to become comfortable in reaching out and advocating for themselves. The link here to our documentation and forms, please be sure to look at that. Maybe 2 months before you enter school and see if you can get documentation. A student who registers with a self-assessment is eligible for accommodations. They're not as fulsome as fulsome as a student who provides us with documentation that is very well completed. We need to understand functional limitations. We need a doctor to sign off on it or a healthcare professional. And so we are able to provide a more fulsome accommodation plan with documentation. Here, there are links here to our online videos, to our course on Learn. We have videos on our YouTube channel. We have many things. We have a fantastic department that works on technology. And thank you for coming. I'm assuming if you came to this meeting that you are definitely invested in accommodations in the post-secondary environment. And there is my contact information here. Anyone can feel free to reach out at AccessAbility Waterloo, but by all means, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help answer any questions that I possibly can. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for being here today to learn a little bit more about accessibility at the University of Waterloo. So we have about 10 minutes for questions from our audience here, and I can see we've got a hand up in the air already. So our friend Jay over here is going to come over with a microphone just so that we can make sure we capture that question for anyone who's listening online as well. Tina, will you be available for questions at the end too? Oh, she's a grant. Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. Go ahead.
So I had one question. I know like right now my kid is in high school and the school provides an FM system that it takes from teacher to teacher. It sounds like you guys don't provide that, but when you mentioned the adaptive tech equipment loan program, does that mean you could borrow an FM system?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it would need to be assessed, right? So we would have to have documentation from an audiologist that says an FM system is required, right? And right, and that's simple enough to get, and we recommend the use of FM systems. We have quite a few students who do use FM systems. I can't say for sure that we have FM systems in our loan cover, but we might. So certainly we are the ones that would be putting that as part of an accommodation plan, which is probably the most important thing. And to be honest, we often have to work with professors to understand, right, what the FM system is, how it works, and get used to that, right? Yeah. You're welcome. Great question.
Other questions that Zena might be able to help with?
Extra timing for test. Does the student have to do the test within the class, or is there a place in particular where they have to do the testing?
Generally speaking, in order to get accommodation for testing, for alternative testing, generally speaking, a student would be taking their test with us in our exam center at Eagles Hall. It's the second floor. It's a great setting, to be honest. It's a much smaller setting. Sometimes exams can be in a room with like 300, 400 students. Not the best environment for probably anyone. And so taking it in our exam center, during finals time, we do rent out rooms across the campus, but they're much smaller than the big rooms. I say usually because there are certain programs where they will do their tests themselves. Our pharmacy. So our pharmacy students will have testing in the pharmacy department. Our campuses, our various campuses outside of Kitchener Waterloo proper. In Stratford, they will do their testing out there, and Cambridge, they will do their testing there. So usually it's with us, but depending upon your program.
Okay, so who will provide instructions for the testing? Will be the teachers? That would it?
How would they determine that?
Yes.
Their accommodation consultant will let them know for sure, where it would be. Normally, unless you're in specific programs, if you're on main campus taking courses, you're gonna be taking, your exams in our exam center, for sure. If you have accommodations. You're welcome.
Thanks for the question. Anyone else who's curious about any other topics relative to accessibility at Waterloo? Well, in that case, I'll say thank you all so much for your time. Well, once again, consider everyone wants to share this information. If you do have one-on-one questions that you'd like to ask, please come on down and feel free to do so. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.